there are actually a lot of resources that founders don't know about. Some of them public and some of them private. And ours is we're a state funded organization, so all our services are free. And even before I stepped in this role, I had no idea all this stuff existed. So we work with a lot of these partner organizations that are a lot of nonprofits and stuff in town that also exclusively work with founders and startups. And there's a organization in Oregon called Business Oregon, so they set aside this kind of money for to put up these hubs all across Oregon to help founders kind of wayfind their way around town. And I'm kind of realizing these wayfinder organizations are kind of critical because there's so many resources. Like in our database of like organizations that help founders, there's almost 200, and we're not even a big town. So if you live in a big town, chances are there's all sorts of resources, all sorts of organizations that are, a lot of them are very niche. There's like, organizations that work with Latino founders, organizations that work with Black founders, Asian founders, you name it. There's probably an organization for that is really there to kind of design to handhold that specific demographic.
You're listening to Forum Founders. We tell stories of immigrant and first-gen entrepreneurs, investors, operators, and ecosystem builders. And on the show, you'll hear incredible stories that often go untold.
Hey, Pat. Welcome to Forum Founders.
All right. Hey, Andy.
Would you want to start with maybe a quick intro about you?
Sure. Wow. Quick intro about me. I am Pat Cheung. I'm a founder and I do other stuff. I like to call myself a tinkerer, I guess you could say. I live in Portland, Oregon right now. I've been living here for about 8 years, and by way of LA and Southern California. And before that, born in Hong Kong.
What brought your family from Hong Kong to LA?
Good question. I don't know. It's these, one of these questions you never really ask your parents. You just kind of follow along when you're 5 years old. So that's when I came. And the story is they always say it's for better life and education. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you or your audience is familiar with Hong Kong, but it's a very competitive place. There's I don't know what the number is now. I mean, I imagine 7 million people thereabouts, in this cramped little island. And just very, very competitive. So, I imagine we came here for education and the American dream. And
very competitive, very busy. Yeah, a lot going on. It's like a international hub of some sort as well, from like manufacturing to shipping. So, but then you found your way to LA. Sunny shores of LA.
Yeah.
How long you just grew up there, went to high school there, graduated, like all that stuff?
Exactly. Well, we actually moved to Orange County. Unlike probably a lot of other immigrants, at least immigrants I knew, I didn't know a lot of families like us. We were blue collar family, so quite honestly, have no idea how we made the quota for immigrants that came here. I mean, my dad actually has an interesting story. I don't know if I totally believe it, but happy to share that story. It's an interesting story. But
yes, please share the story.
Okay. So my dad is a house painter by trade, like a contractor. So very blue collar. He's kind of done it all his life since he was like, I don't know, according to him, since he was 12. I don't know how that actually works, but his dad was also a house painter and blue collar labor. And, I think at the time where they were thinking of immigrating, I'm not even sure. I was probably, 1 or 2 years old. And he had a job painting at like, I think a government job painting at the American consulate. And I think he said he already had his paperwork. He was going to turn it in, but there was a night where he was kind of working a little bit late, painting at the consulate. And, this Westerner came to him kind of in a frantic mood saying, hey, can you help me call a taxi? Because my wife, she's pregnant, I need to get to the hospital. And
Yeah, it
I
was
think
that
he,
urgent moment
yeah,
for
the
the.
urgent moment, and he kind of seized his opportunity, right? He was like, I think there's someone important. He goes, let me take you to the hospital. And it's hard for me to believe because I can't even imagine him speaking English at the time. So I don't know how he communicated. Maybe the guy spoke Cantonese or whatever. But yeah, the story he tells is on the way to the hospital, he gave him the paper, and obviously
No way.
my guess is the
Yeah.
guy knows what those papers are, and he just said he'll do his best, and fast forward however much longer, yeah, we were able to come. And I kind of believe in the story because I just don't know a lot of immigrant families from Hong Kong that don't have other relatives here, but we came just our family, pretty much not knowing anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of our story.
And you have siblings, Pat?
Yes, so I'm the youngest of four siblings. I have two older brothers and sisters, and yeah, we all came as a family of seven.
Yeah.
I would love to really know the ins and outs of that story, but unfortunately, I don't. Like, I imagine it was such a big risk coming here, but yeah, glad they did.
But
And
you
yeah,
first moved out here when you were 1 and 2. So from the earliest memories, you were basically in Orange County, right?
yeah, no, I came when I was 5.
Oh,
Yeah, and I kind of distinctly remember that because I like to think like I pretty much can't remember. I pretty much have no memories before 4. I don't think because I didn't remember Hong Kong too much, but I remember that when we first came, it was so amazing because we in Hong Kong we lived in pretty much what's considered the projects there. They're kind of Hong Kong projects, and it's government housing, right? So I think these flats were, I don't know, like less than 400 square feet. I think it's like 370 something square feet, and there were 8 of us in there.
yeah.
Me, my family, and my grandma, and pretty tiny place. So you learn to exist with very little. And when we came here, I don't know, somehow we moved into a house. I think we were renting a house,
Yeah.
and I remember when I first ran into the house, we just got out of the airport. I think somehow, this is where my memory fails me. I just remember running into the house and then kind of seeing the backyard. And I'm pretty sure I've never seen like a glass door, the glass doors that separate the house from the backyard. Probably never seen that in my life. So I just ran right
Ran
into
straight into it.
yeah. Not knowing that there's a piece of glass, but yeah, I think so that was when I was like, I think yeah, little
Well, that's a
under
core
5.
memory at
Yeah,
5.
core memory. Yeah, anything before that I can't really remember.
Here in New York, we have these like tenement museums and tenement homes. Basically, it's a lot of the immigrant homes, and they have these tours of like, hey, there used to be a family that lived here. There's like 8 to 10 people in this small room, and so what your story really reminds me of that with
Wow, that's
Hong
amazing they
Kong.
have that here.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine it.
How I actually reached out to you was I went on LinkedIn. I was visiting Portland, and through LinkedIn, I think you can do like a search for Portland Metro, looking for keywords on posts around immigrants. And I found your post. I think your post was a story about like Halloween. Do you remember that post?
Yeah, totally. I took a picture of myself this past Halloween of our first costume coming here as immigrants, and we had no idea. We didn't celebrate Halloween in Hong Kong back then. I think maybe they celebrate it now, but I had no idea what it was. I think my parents somehow knew what it was, and we didn't really have maybe the time or the money to get costumes. So my parents were like, let's just take this paper grocery bag, cut some holes in it for the eyes, and put it over your head. So if you can imagine 5 kids, we all did that. And yeah, we went around trick or treating. Yeah, another very memorable American moment.
American moment for sure. And coming
Yeah.
back with a huge bag, all of you, all 5 siblings or 4 siblings.
Yeah,
With,
it's funny. I think somehow they
treats.
had the wherewithal to go to like sort of a wealthier neighborhood. That's the other semi memory I have. I'm like, wow, how did they know to do this? It's kind of, maybe it was
I
intuitive.
mean, you look at big houses and hopefully they're like, yep. Or maybe all the lights that are in decorations.
Yeah, exactly.
How'd you get into startups?
Wow. So yeah, fast forward. I mean, really by a miracle, quite honestly. I found it pretty late in life. So in college, I went to Berkeley. And I'd say, being the last of five, I think my parents really cared the least about what I did. So I didn't have that kind of typical immigrant, parents where they, said you got to be a doctor or a lawyer. I think that by that point they got to me, they were just tired. They're just like, just get through with it, with
Yeah, you
anything.
can do
So
whatever.
yeah, so I unfortunately took advantage of that carefreeness, and I studied English lit. So sort of one of these, majors that kind of, quite honestly, if you're not going to be a lawyer, it's kind of hard to figure out what your next steps are. So quite honestly, I think by necessity, I quickly found tech. I guess not quickly because I did a lot of odd jobs, a lot of weird things, and probably by necessity found entrepreneurship. Because um, when it's hard to get a job, you kind of learn to hustle a little bit. So that was sort of my path. But yeah, I think it was a long journey. I don't want to bore your audience with it or you, but found I think I probably found that path through design. Somehow
Hmm.
I kind of picked up design out of my own accord. I just kind of was enamored by design. And when I joined like my first company, I just noticed, oh wow, designers really get access to a lot of the high level stakeholders
Hmm.
because and in a given organization, they're probably like trying to hatch some project, and they're writing out all these specs, and then it's like the designers that could kind of be the first step in kind of bringing that vision to life. So you're kind of in these rooms where it's just uh, that you ordinarily wouldn't even belong in, right? Because you're like the person that's kind of creating the vision, or kind of helping at least paint the vision of what something that might look like. So that was, yeah, my first taste into technology, and and kind of rode that wave of like being a product designer and all that stuff.
But so you study English lit, but then got fascinated by design,
Mm-hmm.
or saw that interaction within organizations. Did you
Mm-hmm.
pick up designing? Is that how you got into those rooms?
Yeah. So how the nitty gritty of how that happened is before this term called UX design. I still kind of think of it as a relatively new term, even though that's part of the standard language now.
Yeah.
A lot of us were called information architects because like most of the web was text,
Yeah.
and I think with text, having someone who maybe like really geeked out on organization, like I don't know, for some reason it's like my liberal arts studies mind really geeked out on organization. And I don't know if it has anything to do with English lit, but I think there's some thought of like, people who could write content should organize the content. And those people in the very beginning, and they still exist, they're called information architects. And a lot of information architects kind of went on to become UX designers because they kind of studied how minds think, how users interact with technology, how they access technology, and yeah, just kind of pretty intuitive progression actually. And then yeah, and then once you kind of start dabbling in that, you start dabbling in visual design. You can't. It's hard to be a UX designer without thinking about visual design, and
100%. Because that's
um,
how I think about it too, because a lot of my experience is engaging with visual design UX people,
mhm.
not necessarily like text and information.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of how technology evolved. I mean, if you think about the first, big websites are like Yahoo, where it's just like probably mainly text going on, and
For sure. And
mhm.
a little bit of color here and there, a little bit of
Right,
images.
right.
Um, and then, so you were working with different startups, different companies. You end up going out on your own? And what were some of the startups that you were building yourself?
Sure. I mean, I built a lot of weird stuff myself. I mean, probably
Yeah, let's name a few.
oh, I mean, probably the first thing I built, and I'm really bad with dates, so I'm not going to give you any dates, but this idea probably predates um, Venmo. It was a bill sharing app. It was called Billzoo. It's even embarrassing to say the name now because it was such a long time ago. But it
Yeah,
was this
also
idea.
naming is not my specialty, so I respect that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill's is pretty good.
Yeah, but it's like these first projects that just got my feet wet, and I kind of did the thing where I'm like, you know what, I saved up a bunch of money, and it's like let me just pour my savings into this, and built my first app. I'm Yeah, and just amazing learnings along the way, how to work with developers, how to work with well, I guess I was a designer, but how to work with customers, how to do customer development. But yeah, that was a sort of, quite honestly, the first flop. Had no skills about marketing, just kind of wore the builder hat.
Yeah.
So I mean, the simple concept of that app was just how to split bills at the end of like a dinner or something like that.
And you were using like a mobile device? Like it
No,
was
that
a
was
mobile.
definitely predated mobile.
Okay.
So yeah, it wasn't a mobile device. It was all web app. Um, yeah, I think it was
How
like
did the
written in
user flow
PH.
work? Basically, like everyone goes to dinner, they
Yeah,
get a receipt, they come back, go to the web, and then upload that, and then get
I
sent
mean,
an
it
email
wasn't
or
even
something.
receipt. It was so beginner. It was like, I think, wow, I can't even remember, but I think you enter in the amount, you enter in the emails of the people you want to split it with, you enter in the percentage of how it's split, and then it just kind of sends people an email, and it would you wouldn't even be able to pay through the platform like Venmo. It was, it predated, these kind of online payment apps by quite a few years.
And
But
what was next?
next was another failed startup called Townizen. Yeah, that was sort of supposed to be the LinkedIn for the real estate industry. In that, I spent a lot more resources on and time on because at this point, somehow I'd taken a job during the height of the mortgage industry, and I was an account executive, so I made a good amount of money doing that, and because I was sort of in sales, mortgage sales, and that was sort of at the boom, kind of what caused the crash of '08 too. So at that time, I just learned a lot about real estate industry, mortgage industry, and sort of the whole ecosystem around real estate. And I'm like, wow, you know maybe there's a social network kind of missing here, and kind of this place where people can connect, find agents, find homes and stuff. So quite honestly, I don't know if that predated Zillow, but it was kind of like right around that time where people were thinking about these real estate tech companies. And yeah, unfortunately, once again, was still too green. Made a ton of mistakes, and yeah, burned out after a couple of years.
So those two ideas, they're especially if you look at the outcomes of similar companies, they're like pretty good ideas. Where do you think you missed the mark on those two?
Sure. I mean, and maybe this does tie into being an immigrant founder. At that time, it was hard. It was hard to get access. I feel like access to the rooms that kind of help you, and maybe that kind of leads into what I do today, is to help founders because I was just very clueless. Like, to be totally frank, I think I had good ideas. I had like good product instinct and design instinct,
Yeah.
but I just didn't know the steps. I still remember, actually, oddly, my brother was connected a little bit to the industry, but he was connected in Asia. He did a startup here in Hong Kong, and I remember him. He did have like a connection. I think I talked to one VC at that time. Whereas someone who developed a product like me probably could have and should have talked to 30, right? But I just didn't know the game. And maybe it was shortcoming on my part, but it was just hard to get access. And I remember talking to that VC, and it was just like, oh, cool idea. It had no next steps, was just
Okay.
kind of picking his brain and had no idea even how to ask for money, right? So,
Right.
so yeah, just extreme lack of knowledge and that kind of thing.
And were you in LA during that time, or like Bay Area? Since
Yes, I
it's
was in LA, and that was also another hard part because I think LA, the ecosystem in LA hadn't really hit its stride yet.
it's
I
not like
mean,
today, right?
yeah, today is very different, which is interesting because I think, I did eventually, start co-founded a venture-backed startup, and that's when I saw LA really hit its stride, and then access to things became a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can go to that venture-backed startup and maybe the lessons there, or if you want to go into the work that you're doing today, which sounds like a
Um,
good shift.
Yeah, maybe it kind of ties in together. I mean, if there's a theme to this talk at all, is so I mean, after some failures, you just get tired of failures. So I think I did the thing where I probably should have
Yeah, you
done.
don't want to get beat down
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah, getting beat down is demoralizing. And I think I did the right thing after that, which is just join like a more early stage company and take a more sort of pivotal role in the organization. So that's what I did. I, joined this, media company that was kind of the tech company. Um, and there I played the role of head of product and then kind of really sharpened my product management skills and really kind of just met a bunch of great people and did a bunch of great things. And out of there I met I got really close to the CEO, and that's who became my founder for the next thing. Uh, yeah, and it's just really through that experience that sometimes you just gotta eat humble pie a little bit and then kind of play the game a little bit longer, earn some of the stripes, and then kind of do your thing. So that's kind of what I did. So after EQAL got acquired, that was the
And
name of the
what was
media
the
company.
company? What did it do?
It basically built digital presence and strategy for, like, I'd say B-level celebrities. So we were kind of one of these like very first influencer networks in LA, which is very appropriate.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just a great team. I think it was a company of about 60 to 80 people. So just a good amount of size where it's not too big, where you kind of become a cog in the wheel, and then you could take some leadership positions there. So that's what I did. And once again, I think maybe through just some good work, got really close to the CEO, and when they got acquired, I just said, hey, when you're ready to do your next thing, give me a call. Maybe we could do it together, and that's kind of what happened with the next thing.
And today, what are you up to, Pat? You are with the Metro Hub, right?
Yes.
In Portland. What's
Yes.
that all about?
So Portland has a state-funded organization called the Portland Metro Region Innovation Hub. And our whole sort of charter is to help founders on their journey, which is, has always resounded with me, I guess, even as I'm, recapping my journey. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's true. It's like people, there are times where I wish people were there to help along the way and they weren't there. And definitely times where people were there to help that I got to leverage. So, yeah, now I get to kind of pay it forward and kind of step into that role. So I've only been, the organization is pretty new. It's like about a year old. And and I recently stepped into that role about almost 2 months ago.
Who started so it's a year old. Who started this whole org, and what was the mission for Metro Hub? Was it always to help founders?
Yeah, good question. And I think there's some good takeaways for anyone in your audience. That I think in any given city, there are actually a lot of resources that founders don't know about. Some of them public and some of them private. And ours is we're a state funded organization, so all our services are free. And even before I stepped in this role, had no idea all this stuff existed. So we work with a lot of these partner organizations that are a lot of nonprofits and stuff in town that also exclusively work with founders and startups. And there's a organization in Oregon called Business Oregon. So they set aside this kind of money for to put up these hubs all across Oregon to help founders kind of wayfind their way around town. And I'm kind of realizing these wayfinder organizations are kind of critical because there's so many resources like in our database of like organizations that help founders. There's almost 200, and we're not even a big town. So if you live in a big town, chances are there's all sorts of resources, all sorts of organizations that are, a lot of them are very niche. There's like, organizations that work with Latino founders, organizations that work with Black founders, Asian founders, you name it. There's probably an organization for that is really there to kind of design to handhold that specific demographic.
And is Metro Hub's main audience the founders who are like already in Portland, or are they looking to make Portland become more of, let's say, a Seattle, or more of, drive innovation into Portland?
Yeah.
How do you look at those two different audiences?
That's a good question. I think, in this role, I think I have to think a lot more about ecosystems. So I've been, I think one of the reasons why I took this role, because I've been kind of volunteering as like a founder who gives back for about 8 years here when I moved here about 8 years ago. And I think, part of the premise of creating an ecosystem is manyfold, right? There's many facets of it. You want to bring people in. You don't want brain drain, right? So you have to support the people here. I think that's primarily what we do. And I think if you support the people here sort of on a micro level, it just sort of kind of word gets out. Oh, Portland's a great place to start a startup because there's other startups like me here, right? If you go to a place where, you kind of visit and you're like, oh, there's no one like me here, then
right.
It's just not appealing. So
right.
I think on a very micro level, that's kind of how we work. We're like, well, let's get this buzz around Portland where it's just like, wow, there's people with great ideas and they're feeling supported. They're being encouraged by the city and by the region and by the state. And let's get that going first, right? And then we could tackle the big problems of like, well, how do we, attract like these bigger corporations to come? So it's just all an ecosystem. Like the big and the small all have to kind of work together.
Yeah, we talked about it when I saw you in person in Portland. But one of the big ideas that I believe in is that unless you are huge ecosystems like Hong Kong, New York, as an example, I think it's really important to pick out the select few industries that can create this like feedback loop where there's one or two or few companies that have huge outcomes and success, and then the alumni basically go out on their own and kind of create that feedback loop. With regards to Portland, what are some of the industries that you think Portland's really exceptional in?
Oh, good question. Like if, stemming from that framework that you just alluded to, I mean, we've had, sort of our claim to fame, some of our claim to fame is, footwear, right? Because Nike was born here.
Yep.
I don't know if you read or watched Shoe Dog. Amazing story.
Amazing story.
Yeah, and that all kind of happened right in our backyard here in Portland. So we have, because of the climate here, the mountains and the nature. So outdoors and apparel and footwear is definitely a big category. Like we have a lot of big brands like Nike, Adidas headquarters here. Under Armour has a big presence here. A lot of the bigs are here. So, and we have a lot of small, brands that, if you're an enthusiast, you probably heard of, like, blanking on some of the names, but like some, like Danner is a really good boot company here.
Yeah.
It's, all made here. So, Yeah, that kind of stuff is big here.
Hey, if you know athletics and outdoor wear, that was kind of like your challenge for are you a Portlander or not? That was it. Like to be able to just name all the brands off the top of your
Identify them.
head.
Yeah. I think I'm halfway there. There's probably,
Almost.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely a big one. I'd say food and beverage is another big one. We have a big brewery industry. Like, I think we're probably one of the top two places for microbreweries in terms of per capita. Um, you know, I'd imagine the only competing city is like San Diego or something like that. But like, so our hub, the organization I work for, we're our host organization is the PSU, Portland State University, and they have a program around brewing. That's how big that industry is. So a lot of
Wow.
times these brewers, once they get big, they'll can their beverages, and then it kind of becomes like a national thing. So that's another sort of pretty big industry. Yeah.
With those founders, let's say they find MetroHub, what are the main things that you're helping them with or that they're asking for help with?
Yeah, so we, honestly service a pretty wide range of startup types. So they could have an idea for a food and beverage, and we would, provide them with mentorship, workshops, things like that, and even connections with other organizations. So there's, so for example, let's take a food and beverage. We actually have something called the Food Innovation Center here. That their whole purpose is to help an entrepreneur get their food shelf ready and shelf stable, and kind of put them in front of buyers like New Seasons and Whole Foods, and yeah, things like that are pretty special. I think like like quite honestly, like when I first moved here, I'm from LA, right? One of the first like social gatherings I went to was a coincidentally a Halloween party. And I was just surprised that like I think in LA it would be like a room full of tech people, which is like fun but kind of disgusting.
Yeah.
But here, I think I was one of the few tech people. I met some farmers, people with all, at sort of all different types of industries. So I think that's kind of one of our strengths too. Like there's a lot of just different, diverse experiences here, which is super fascinating and can lead to some pretty interesting outcomes for what kind of companies could spring out of here.
Yeah, that's what I felt too when I moved from San Francisco to New York. It's just
Mm.
a lot of the conversation in the former, like San Francisco, it's just conversation about technology. Then New York, it's a lot more dynamic in what we talk about and the backgrounds and the people and like stuff like that. So,
Yeah. I'll
um,
give one other thing I think we're good at. This is my own thesis. I think as bootstrapping is sort of taking shape as like a pretty legitimate way to grow a business and to grow a startup. I mean, I do think we're ripe to be one of the sort of the meccas for bootstrapping. And my thesis is just like I
oh,
think
interesting.
bootstrappers.
You said Portland, you think is a mecca for bootstrapping.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's just a simple thesis. It's just I think there's just enough technology here to make it interesting. You're not moving out to the boonies or whatever. There is actually like a city with a skyline and like good food and all that stuff here. And I just went to an AI event last night, and I was quite honestly blown away by a couple of the. There were four presenters, and I was blown away by maybe two or three of the presenters. Like they had amazing products. And why I think it's good for bootstrappers is like a lot of times bootstrappers they can't afford to live in tier one city because just the cost of living is so high. So I always thought, wow, if there's it's probably on the short list of cities that if a bootstrapper is trying to be capital efficient with their life, um not many cities come to mind. Yeah, I think we're one of the few ones that is like, oh, this is very attractive. Like the real estate is still relatively low compared to tier one cities, and there's still enough like inspiration and creativity coming out of here that it makes it attractive. I think.
I love that. I agree with you. I think 3 years ago, I was in a program where we were accelerator, so we were building our early stage startups. We're aiming towards fundraising. I would say at that time, almost 50% of the people in my cohort, the companies, they said after that experience, they would never raise VC.
Mm.
And that was almost like the first time I realized, oh my gosh, there's a whole group of companies and cohorts that are completely building bootstrapped and not even entertaining or don't think that's the right avenue, whether it's like the market that tackling, the companies that they're building, even like the ethos that they have. So to hear that about Portland is like super cool. I had no idea,
Yeah.
but it totally makes sense. It's like there's enough talent density, there's enough money, there's enough customer and ecosystem support that, and the cost is way less than San Francisco, LA, or New York,
Yeah.
or even Seattle, where they're like, okay, this is probably a good place. I also have another idea where it's probably like a lot of cool startups are getting built in Scandinavia
Mm.
because for majority of their winters, it's so hard to
Right.
there's not much to do outside of the home
Right.
because it's so cold. And therefore it becomes a place where people are like, yeah, let's hunker down and like build stuff. So I'm almost thinking like those are different ways where bootstrapping becomes interesting. I was reading a story about, I think it was the Notion founders, where they
Oh.
were doing a bunch of different pivots,
Hmm.
and they're like, yeah, let's go live in a low cost place, and
Mm.
went to Japan,
Oh, no way.
and
Did they?
yeah, I think lived there for like 12 months and
Wow.
finally figured out what we see as like an early stage product of Notion.
Yeah.
I think I'm telling the story right, but yeah, people just find these locations where they're like, let's just batch down the hatchet and like, build.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
bootstrapping is
Bootstrapping
interesting.
is such a different playbook. It's just like, as long as you can make your life work, that's your runway.
For sure. With that, I think, yeah, we're coming to an end. But is there anything that you want to do, like PSA for people who want to check out Portland? I know you host a bunch of events.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are listeners who are based out of Portland. They're like, oh, I had no idea Pat had this program. Anything you want to share with them?
Yeah, I mean, happy to be the first point of contact and be the welcome mat if you're an entrepreneur coming to Portland. Especially, I mean, not to be discriminatory, but especially if you're a foreign founder for your
Because you
audience.
experienced that yourself, being like, oh, I didn't know. It's almost like mentorship, support, community of other founders.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I like to, I always like to roll out the welcome mat and happy to be a first point of contact. You could leave my links, my individual links, or the hub's link
Yeah.
in the show notes. But yeah, happy to do that. I welcome you. And the PSA really is just like this. This really is a good place to start a business. Yeah, I can't think of a better place, quite honestly. I think we have some bad rep in media sometimes, but just boots on the ground. It's like, even when I'm looking out my window here, it's just like the
Yeah.
neighborhoods are charming, the people are nice, and yeah, good food and all.
Yeah, I love it. Those are all winning qualities. Pat, thanks for joining me on Foreign Founders.
All right, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.